Alright, kings, gentlemen, everyone else, welcome to yet another exciting episode of Hiding from the Sun, because it's really scorching, even this early in the morning. Anyways, we're going to have to talk a little bit about strategy. We're going to have to talk about war. Well, once again, favorite topic of this channel. So, recently there was a report I believe in the Washington Post, so this is what Jeff Bezos wants you to think about, that there is a Ukrainian plan and Russian fears that Ukraine will strike the Russian Pacific Fleet. So in the Russian Far East, where it's moored in Vladivostok, I believe, and a little bit of these submarines are up in Kamchatka. That's the peninsula right across the Bering Strait to Alaska. Anyways, so normally, I wouldn't really think about this, but then you had reporting from Ukraine, which is one of the more respected, war YouTube channels here, saying pretty much the same thing, that the Russians are fearing a repeat of Operation Web in the Russian Far East, in the Pacific. Specifically targeting the Russian Pacific Fleet. And for those of you that don't know, obviously you can't not know at this point, but Operation Web was the Ukrainian operation that used civilian trucks as drone carriers, ferried them out to Russian strategic air bases and hit the Russian strategic bombers, the missile-carrying Tupolevs, and some of the early warning, the AWACS planes, the things with the round thing on top. That's a radar. I'm sorry, I'm not an aviation specialist. I'm just some asshole on the internet. Anyways, so what the Ukrainians did was they had civilian truckers ferry this shit up to the air bases. The drone carrier modules opened. Drones came flying out, slammed into the airplanes, crippled a third of Russia's strategic aviation fleet, seriously damaging the air leg of the Russian nuclear triad. And now the Russians are, and at the same time, so there was another part of the operation, again by the Ukrainian SBU, that's the Security Service of Ukraine, an intelligence and counterintelligence outfit. And what they're going to do is, what they did was they used an underwater drone to slam into the supports of the Kerch Bridge, which connects the Russian mainland to Crimea, thus destabilizing the whole thing. Now, it hasn't brought it down. The Kerch Bridge is a superstructure. It's a massive blob of concrete and steel. It's going to take some, and bridges are, as a general rule, tough. Well, this is a super tough bridge, apparently, very big, but it's now not exactly usable because of one of the supports has been destabilized. And so the Russians are now putting two and two together. If the Ukrainians have the capacity and planning and logistics and patience and just the sheer innovation to use civilian carriers, contracted civilian carriers as drone carriers, right? And if they have this capability to develop massive underwater drones, so these drones that the Ukrainians apparently used on the Kerch Bridge are bigger than a conventional torpedo. Just one of them could sink a ship if it connects. Now that's a big if, but so the Russians are saying, so why couldn't they do this to our Pacific Fleet moored in the Sea of Japan, in Vladivostok? The Japanese are right there. They could assist them, right? And so I guess the little wheel of paranoia is going. And a lot of the pro-Ukraine content creators are out there saying, you know what, Ukraine should do this. Ukraine should strike the Russian Pacific Fleet. Now, I'm gonna be negative Nelly. I'm gonna be the guy who says no. Ukraine should not strike the Russian Pacific Fleet for a very simple reason. There would be no point to it. The Russian Pacific Fleet is not in the war, and due to the nature of the beast, like the main theater of the Russo-Ukrainian war is the territory of Ukraine, the territory of Russia adjoining Ukraine, and the Black Sea. And the Sea of Azov. And The Black Sea is a Mediterranean sea. You can only enter and exit it one way, and that's through the Bosphorus. The Bosphorus and Dardanelles. The straits are controlled by Turkey, and due to the Montreux Convention, Turkey reserves the right to close these straits during wartime. And the Turks have done this. They have closed these straits to Russian warships because there was a war on, right? So there's literally no way for the Russian Pacific Fleet or the Russian Arctic Fleet or the Russian Baltic Fleet to enter the Black Sea and threaten Ukraine. And so destroying a ship of the Russian Pacific Fleet would really not help the Ukrainian war effort. I mean, it would demoralize the Russians. It would put the fear of God into them that, you know, they could hit us anywhere. And it would serve as a sort of morale booster to Ukraine, but there's much better targets, much better shit to hit in the Russian Far East. If you can hit shit in the Russian Far East, you know, why not hit the ammunition factories? Why not hit the weapons depots? Why not hit recruitment centers? Why not hit, I don't know, oil and gas and rail infrastructure? I think the Ukrainian war effort would be better served by destroying one locomotive of the Russian railways than destroying 2 or 3 ships of the Russian Pacific Fleet, because locomotives are essential to Russian logistics, and the Russian Pacific Fleet is just sitting there doing butt-fuck nothing. They can't do nothing. In fact, if you destroy the ships, what could happen is, well, the Russians can then gang press the sailors into becoming infantry and charging at Ukrainian positions in Donbass, which is something that happened with the aircraft carrier the Russians have. I forget its name, but essentially the Russians sort of made a peace with that this thing is never going to sail again. So they took the crew, which is substantial, it's a fucking aircraft carrier, and they gang pressed them into becoming line infantry. Just sort of hurled them at the Ukrainians. A lot of these people are now dead or maimed. They're never going to serve in any military, you know. They're never going to be soldiers. They're never going to be seamen. So, yeah, it's like, what would this accomplish, really? Nothing. And so, you know, if Ukraine does have the capability to hit Russian targets in the Far East, there's far better things to do. Like, go after their industry, go after their depots, go after their recruitment stations, go after, I don't know, blow up locomotives and bridges, or destroy rail infrastructure. I mean, destroying rail lines, rail tracks is good, but they're very easily replaced. Locomotives, Russia cannot replace locomotives, and already the existent Russian locomotives are feeling the strain. So, you know, anyone that goes out actually puts even more strain on the system. Russian railways it's a shit show. There's a thread on Blue Sky I was reading recently. Very fun, actually, to read. Okay, so that's the reason why not. And I maintain, because that's the thing, you gotta understand that war is not Paradox Gaming. War is not Crusader Kings. War is not Hearts of Iron. You don't get victory points for destroying enemy forces far from the theater of operations. You have to actually ask yourself, what am I trying to accomplish in this war? And what is the enemy trying to accomplish in this war? And how can I subvert the enemy while advancing my own aims? And there's just literally nothing about destroying a Russian Pacific Fleet ship that advances Ukrainian war aims or frustrates Russian war aims. With the exception of one thing, and that is, if Ukraine manages to convince 2 powers, in particular, Japan and South Korea, that they should support Ukraine more directly than they already have, and they haven't really given much support to Ukraine. And in exchange, Ukraine will destroy the naval assets of one of their adversaries. Of course, these countries, both of them, the primary adversary would be North Korea, and the secondary would be China. And Russia's sort of a tertiary player. But if there's a happening in the Pacific Rim, you can bet your marbles that Russia's going to be behind China and behind North Korea, because North Korea and China have been behind Russia in this thing. So, here's how I can see the thing happening, the deal going. It would be really a situation of Moshi Moshi, Zelensky, Ishida, we need 5 billion torpedoes to destroy Russian Pacific Fleet. I don't know. How do you say glory to Japan in Japanese? I took one Japanese class and I only learned to say Ogenki desu ka and moshi moshi and genki genki. So essentially the deal would go that in exchange for increased support for Ukraine in the Russo-Ukrainian war, Japan and South Korea would simply have the Ukrainians destroy or severely damage the Russian Pacific Fleet in anticipation of future conflicts in the Pacific Rim, where Russia could ostensibly step in as an ally of North Korea and China. And that's the only way in which I would say that Ukraine striking a Russian Navy, a Russian Pacific Fleet port or ship would be good for the war effort if in return it secures massive support from South Korea and Japan. But is that happening? I don't know. It should be. I think that Japan and Korea should be supporting Ukraine in this war, seeing as how their enemies, China, North Korea, and Russia, are basically all in on this. And of course, people are saying, oh, you're going to demoralize Russia, you're going to just decrease Russian capability. But don't forget, Russia is all in on this. They don't care about the Pacific Fleet. They're not even going to redeploy more men to guard it, because to them, the Pacific Fleet is a write-off if they can get Ukraine. So yeah, it's a bad idea, unless it happens in that way in which I mentioned, which sounds a little mercenary and scummy, but that's international relations for you. So chew on that for a little bit. Bye-bye, folks, and take care.